Turn on your Hey, Adhi, can you say something? Test the mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, nice. Works.
Because there are more people who want to go to it than there are space.
Fuck, wait, my thing broke.
How do you share your screen?
Yeah, one sec.
I was about to ask if you were. It sounded suspiciously like that.
Okay, LaTeX is being odd with compiling my slides. I'm like letting it go. I'm just gonna like talk for a bit until we get my slides. My slides are actually all just screenshots from the Linux kernel mailing list. So I can just like read out the things that I would say from the Linux kernel mailing list. So it does not like actually particularly matter what is on my slides. So this is not actually like a technical intro to Linux in the kernel. This is more rather like a story of like all of the like very odd and interesting people affiliated with Linux in the kernel, because they're all like just like generally odd people. And like for some reason, this has caused just like an absurd amount of just like weird internal infighting within Linux as like an organization. I think like by the end, I have like a kill count of like 5 or 6 people that like leave the project over quotes such as "we are the thin blue line," we being people who write C code, and like we like protect code quality or whatever, referring to like the rustations and like other nonsense. So I guess like the timeline starts in 1991 when the Linux kernel releases, and it's all C. At some point in 1997, they try C++ for about like 2 weeks, and then like they realized that it is a bad idea. Direct quotes from Linus are kernel code in C++ is a bloody stupid idea. Quote, and then a new quote, "You are full of bullshit. C++ is a horrible language. It's made more horrible by the fact that a lot of substandard programmers use it, to the point where it's much easier to generate total and utter crap with it. Quite frankly, even if the choice of C were to do nothing but keep the C++ programmers out, that in itself would be a huge reason to use C." And then like more recently in 2024, like in the kernel mailing list, some like C++ RFC like shows up somehow. And then he says they're, quote, "self-inflicted damage by the C++ standards body." So my suggestion is that someone should put some psychoactive drugs into the fountain machine at the next C++ standards meeting. And when all the members are susceptible to sane suggestions, you instead tell them that the abstract machine was a mistake. What? Yes. Okay, cool. So in 2006, they make Rust because like Mozilla developers like also realized that like writing C++ is like hard and like stepping on glass. And like we can like move on or whatever. But like, so in 2013, this is when like, so like, you might not think that like Rust for Linux started around then, but in 2013, some like Georgia Tech professor named Tae-Soo Kim writes a kernel module. And like here he realizes the main tech. So there are, I'm going to talk about technical like Linux Rust in the kernel a bit. The main issue is that the Linux ABI is not stable at all. People add like private struct fields and like change around things, and like compiler optimizations mean that like the actual binary changes all the time. So foreign function interface into like compilations of the kernel is not stable across let's see, it's not stable across versions, it's not stable across like compiler versions, it's not stable across like build flags, it's not stable across like many other like things. That means that like doing FFI into the kernel is a bit odd, and you have to use this tool called Rust bindgen that like generates Rust code to do foreign function interface for you at build time. This is like helpful because it means that like you don't have to like rewrite like the like foreign function interface part of your Rust code every time something in the kernel changes. But it does mean that like the unsafe interfaces that you put on top of those FFI, on top of that FFI code, does need to change. But like the nice trick that like Linux has is like it all lives in one place, so it's like kind of easy to like deal with, and you can just like do all of it in like the like actual driver code can all just like only talk to like your stable, like safe interface, which doesn't change at all. And then like, because this happens, like this is just like a thing that exists in our memory, like from 2013 to around like 2018 or 2019. And it's just like, oh, we can do this thing. It works in Rust. And I'm sure like people have like built kernel modules in other languages like for fun. So I'm sure no one like really thought about it. But in August 2019, two like very important people for Rust in the kernel, Alex Gaynor and Jeffrey Thomas, say the magic words: 65% of Linux kernel vulnerabilities are due to memory unsafety issues, not logic issues. In their talk at 2019 Linux Security Summit, titled "Writing Linux Kernel Modules in Safe Rust," they make a very simple argument. If hardening C via like ASAN and like there's like other proposals for like syscall isolation and like a bunch of other stuff, if all of this stuff slows down C to the point that it's like Java or like C# or like some other language that is not like very like phenomenally fast, what is the point of using C? But if it is true that we like want to do things like checking for like use after free and buffer overflow and whatnot, then like it is probably good to at the very least look into the language that is all about like memory safety, because they're all like compile time checks and zero cost abstractions or whatever. So the entire talk is actually mostly just an introduction to Rust and like how it works to kernel devs, because at this point it's 2019. Rust like exists and people obviously use it, but like I'm sure lots of kernel devs just like don't know what to do when they look at Rust, so they kind of have to figure it out. And then the rest of the talk is just explaining Rust. It's a bit of C++ bashing actually, because like they also bring up the point that like people have tried other languages in the kernel in the past, and like people no, like they were like no, like Linus is like on record somewhere saying there will be no language in the kernel except for C. C is the perfect language for kernel development. And like, sure, whatever. But like now he's like obviously changed his mind. In August 2020, there was another talk given by both the aforementioned Alex Gaynor and Jeffrey Thomas and a few other people, including Miguel Ojeda, who is like the main Rust for Linux person. We will see him later whenever we get to like screenshots of the Linux kernel mailing list and like people yelling at each other. And effectively, what happens in this talk is that like it's about adding new Rust code into the kernel as opposed to rewriting things. So effectively, what they're proposing is that like instead of going and like taking old subsystems and turning them into Rust, which is like perhaps bug prone, we should just like every time we think of new systems, we should write them in Rust. And then the rest of the talk is just like figuring out how you would do interop between like your new Rust code and your old C code. And a couple of other things. And then in March 2021, Torvalds is like now open to the idea. In an interview, he says, quote, "In no way pushing for Rust, but open to it given its advantages." And then he like proceeds to bash C++ again, which is like seemingly like a trend here. Everyone hates C++, I guess. Yeah, okay. So then it like actually starts. In August 14, 2021, the Rust for Linux RFC officially drops, and Miguel Ojeda starts Rust in the kernel. It's a set of patches and a bunch of people respond to it. The response is actually quite civilized. Like Linus doesn't extreme crash out. He has like everyone has their own like little like technical issues with it. Linus's main thing is that allocation is not fallible in the like initial Rust for Linux implementation. This is like quite bad because it means that like out of memory or like other allocation failures auto panic, which is something that Linus has said should never happen. So like his argument is that like we should just use result types, and or rather his argument is that like they should just like return errors as values. And I was like, oh, that's the Rust thing. And then they like through like the kernel mailing list like thing, like they just like they figure it out, and then they like go like, oh, like we should just build a new allocator crate that returns a result if our thing fails. And then they like figure it out and it like goes well. There's a few other things. I think like another technical gripe is that like people like get mad at this like whole like ABI stability thing, and like people, and then like other like Rust for Linux people point out that like you can just use Rust bindgen and generate all your FFI code on the fly, which is like quite good, or not on the fly, but like at build time, which is good. And then in September 2021, at this conference called the Linux Plumbers Maintainers, or Linux, something like that. The Linux Plumbers Conference. Torvalds tells Miguel Ojeda that the kernel will conduct a Rust trial, but that it is just a trial and it is not like anything more. And yeah, so then September 29, 2021, we get like a big thing. So another previous technical issue that people had with Rust in the kernel was that Rust, the main Rust C, or like the Rust compiler, is an LLVM compiler. which means like there was no like spec. It's like the reference implementation for Rust is the Rust compiler, and alternate Rust compilers, their like entire policy is if our output differs from Rust C, like the main LLVM one, that's a bug, and we need to go make our thing like be like feature complete with rather feature. We should have feature parity, and like we should like effectively output the same things as the LLVM Rust C, because there is still no like spec for Rust. It's just like an implementation. Like sure, there are like RFCs and like the language is defined somewhere, but not like formally in this way that like C has an ISO specification. And then so because this was the case, there's a bunch of like bespoke architectures that Linux does support because Linux supports being built with GCC mainly. And then like because this is the case, like Rust like support for like various subsystems or like various drivers like doesn't exist on those architectures, which is a bit odd and like people generally get mad at it. And then like because this is the case, now we get a thing called Rust C CodeGen GCC merged. This is like a nice thing because it's a GCC backend that allows you Rust C to like emit GCC code. This means that like every like thing that GCC targets can now be targeted by Rust C, which is nice. And then this means that like there's more architectural support in the kernel for Rust specifically, which means that like your platform doesn't require LLVM backend, your build toolchain doesn't require LLVM, etc. Which is another thing that people are getting mad at, like, oh, I need another compiler, like, which is like, oh, whatever. But like, I don't think at the time it was relevant for x86 or ARM, but I think it was relevant for MIPS ? Because of like some weird LLVM issue. I'm not particularly sure what happened. And then like from September 2021 to October 2021, or my bad, to October 2022, there were 10 versions of this initial branch, which is all effectively just like all of the scaffolding code that you need for Rust. So it's all of these like nice little safe APIs around kernel functions like kprintf, which is the kernel's printf function, or like what else? I think like kalloc or like all of the other like, or like I guess like k like stir2l, or like all the other just like specific like kernel functions that have been re-implemented because like they just like need to, like it is nice to just like do code reuse. All of this stuff is like in like one big patch, and it is just like iterated through over and over again. And then like in October 1st, 2022, so a year after all of this process, the first initial branch, it's like made as a pull request to like the main Linux kernel branch. And then October 3rd, Torvalds merges. And then on December 11th of that same year, Linux 6.1 releases. And that's the first kernel release after that commit was merged into the tree. So effectively, Linux 6.1 is the first kernel with Rust support. This does not mean that there is like anything that like is actually done in the kernel yet. It takes like over a year for another driver to be written, but like all of the scaffolding for other people to write Rust code. So effectively, Rust for Linux can now just like actually do things, which was also a criticism that people had for Rust for Linux, was that like people were spending too much time writing like random like nonsense and like not actually like writing things that like really mattered. Okay. My slides work now. Let's see if I can screen share that. Okay, as I said, it's mostly just like quotes. Yeah. Yeah, I'm about to. Okay, so this was from the RFC to like V10 of the patch, which is submitted at the beginning of October 2022. So there were 220 patches across 10 revisions, which is quite a few, but many people had many thoughts on Rust in the kernel. And Miguel Ojeda, as well as all of the other people at the early Rust for the kernel people, realized that they had to get this right. Otherwise, if they messed it up, Rust for the kernel was probably screwed, and all of like the C evangelists would have just like kicked it out, and like they would have just like moved on with their lives. So there was like quite a bit of review and whatnot. Yeah, and then Torvalds merges. Now the fun part. So in December 2023, the first real Rust driver is made. It's 135 lines of Rust, and it's this person named Fujita Tomonori, and they write a driver for this like thing. I'm not sure what it is. It's like some chip. It's like a reference driver, and more importantly, when it's merged into Linux 6.8, the C version still remains default. So like people are still like kind of scared of like merging like just Rust code into the main Linux tree. But I guess this is like a good start. And then we have a few things that show up. 6.8 is Linux Rust drivers showing up. 6.9 we get actual ARM support. 6.10 you get RISC-V support, and there's this like weird like thing that happened where there was like this massive alloc fork like of the allocator crate in the Rust in the Linux kernel, because like there was some like just like weird like things that people needed to do to the allocator to get it to work in Rust. One of them is like the fallibility thing. But like there are a few other like quirks, and then at some point they just like dropped the fork and they just like wrote abstractions over things that implemented, or that, what's the word in Rust? Is it, yeah, that impled like the allocator trait, because it was stabilized by this point. Before there was no like allocator trait, and like allocating in Rust, like custom allocators in Rust were all a bit odd. And then in 6.12 this is an LTS kernel, so Rust gets into an LTS kernel, which is and then like a new like real Rust driver actually happens, and then like someone writes a DRM pen QR code generator, which is user facing in Rust. Quote, I wanted to learn Rust and see if it can work. So people are just like doing things for fun at this point. But like Torvalds is getting a bit impatient. At an open source summit in China, he says, quote, old time kernel developers are used to C and don't know Rust, and they're not excited about having to learn a new language. This is like another like thing that like shows up later. Like people get a bit mad. If you're noticing, there's 30 more slides and we're in August 2024, which is like a year and a half ago. So things are about to happen. And then like this like quote also like is like a bit like foreshadowy. The whole Rust versus C thing has religious overtones, which is also like another fight that's about to happen. Okay. On August 28, 2024, Wedson Philho resigns. He was like early Rust for Linux people. And he was just like, yeah, I'm done with it. Quote, I cannot respond to non-technical nonsense. But then he also like still like evangelized about Rust for the kernel. He's like, oh, I believe the kernel, its future is with memory safe languages. And if Linux doesn't realize it, someone will do to Linux what Linux did to Unix, in that like they'll just like build a new kernel and like people will just like kind of move to that one. At the end of this, I guess this like rendered poorly. At the end of this, this person links a YouTube video to a talk that they gave at a like some conference where, so there's this guy called Theodore So. He's about to show up a bunch. But anyways, long story short, yeah, so a talk happened. He was like talking about like some like file system, and there's like, oh, like no unsafeness in my file system. And then after this talk, Ted So like stands up and says, you are not going to force us to learn Rust. Like no Rust. And then like they fight. Like he's like standing in the audience, and like Wedson is like on stage giving a talk, and they're like, there's some like absurd like nonsense happening where they like fight like in the middle of a conference, in the middle of a talk, because like Ted So is like, oh, these Rust people are gonna mess up my ext4 implementation, and then like a bunch of like nonsense happens, and then Wedson like says to like some magazine, like, I guess we'd be past like tantrums from like respected kernel devs, and like this is just like kind of what caused him to give up. This is like another like trend you will see, like just random harassment happens and then people give up. I'll just like work on other things, and other things not being the Linux kernel. Okay, now we have like the Hellwig incident. Okay, Christoph Hellwig maintains DMA, direct memory access, as a subsystem for the kernel. This guy, Abdiel Janolgue, submits a patch for Rust DMA bindings, and then Hellwig says one comment: no Rust code in kernel/DMA. Like no other reason. Like I think the code like also has like other issues, and people just like go back and forth and like fix it. But like Hellwig is like does not even bother reviewing it. It's just like, no, I do not want it here. I will not deal with your shiny language of the day. No multi-language projects. And then quote, if you want to make Linux impossible to maintain due to a cross-language code base, do that in your driver instead of spreading this cancer to core subsystems. And then later he said, oh, I didn't mean cancer for Rust. I meant it like all cross-language code bases. And it's like who cares? Like obviously he meant Rust in the moment. But like this is all like stuff that is like codified in the Linux kernel mailing list. Like the source for all of this, all the things I've like linked are like links to like lore dot whatever. Like I forget the actual URL, but like it's like this is all like these people are like saying this stuff, and it's just like it's there forever, and anyone can go find like there are like random fights about this stuff. Okay, now new guy hops in, Hector Martin. Hector Martin is the Asahi Linux guy. Asahi Linux is like a crazy project. If you're noticing, Asahi Linux hasn't done anything recently because as a result of this, Hector Martin hops in, says all of these like maintainer saboteurs, they're all saboteurs because they're not like including Rust in the kernel, and then they're like Torvalds, make a decision. And then Linus says like you're social media brigading, stop. I don't know like if this is like really true. Like I'm not unsure like to the level of like what actually happened. Well, like people are like, oh, like you're like talking about this on Twitter and like getting like public opinion against stuff, just like all like kind of nonsensical. And then Martin says, quote, I will now proceed to fuck off. Good luck. And then he immediately resigns as the ARM kernel maintainer and then resigns from all of Asahi Linux. So it's like the main Asahi Linux person, doesn't exist anymore. If you all have like M3s and are noticing that like there is no Asahi Linux for M3, it's like this is why. Like Christoph Hellwig was just like, no, there will be no Rust. The big issue here is that like large parts of Asahi Linux are all Rust drivers because like they were all just written from scratch, and people are just like, oh, let's just write Rust because we can just do it from scratch. Because we're starting from new, there's no C code that we have to do like interop with, other than like the core of the kernel, which happens anyways. Okay, new Ted So thing. Ted So says same thread, by the way, that like where like Hellwig goes off and says no Rust in my kernel subsystem, which now today actually new drivers for DMA can only be written in Rust. So it's like like we got the last, or rather the Rust people got the last laugh. Ted So says, quote, the maintainers are not all powerful. We are the thin blue line that is trying to keep the code maintainable and high quality. I don't know what he could possibly be referring to, a thin blue line. Like, Ted So is American, not even like, he doesn't even have the excuse of like, oh, I'm like from a different country. I don't have like the political like implications that like you guys have. Like, no, this is an American. Thin blue, like this idiom like doesn't even make sense here. And then he's just like mindlessly like, oh, like C is the thin blue line from like Rust like infecting the kernel or same guy who told same guy who like got up during the file system talk and told Wedson to fuck off. So this guy's killed 2 Rust developers, by the way. And like he's probably gonna, I think he kills a few more. So the day after this, Miguel Ojeda, the like main Rust kernel guy, emails like the formal Rust kernel policy out, and it's like no subsystem has to do Rust. And then Hellwig is like immediately, no. Linus is gonna merge code over a maintainer's objection or whatever, so you have to deal with Rust whether you want to or not. And then another person resigns. Carol Herbst says thin blue line is just like unacceptable. Bye. Herbst is also German, so it's like like oh, like I guess they're not about like the fascism life anymore. And then like Novo also gets cooked, so it's like Ted So is like killed another like cool driver, and then Novo is also just like superseded by Nova, which is a Rust NVIDIA driver. So it's like who really got the last laugh? I don't think it was Ted So. Yeah, so it just like immediately left, and then Linus sends the email, which is quote, he tells Hellwig that like you just like cannot, or the idea behind this email is that while Hellwig can determine that the subsystem cannot contain Rust because it's their subsystem maintain, they cannot they cannot object to other people adding bindings to their C code such that Rust code can interrupt with the DMA layer. And even though the DMA layer like doesn't change at all, the idea is that like subsystems can have the internal decision to not contain Rust, but it is just like certainly absurd to say like Rust users can never do kernel interop with our code at all. Like you can never like interface with anything we've written, because the PR that like caused all of this was not like, oh, like DMA is going to have Rust now, like it's becoming woke. Like no. It's just like there were bindings, Rust bindings were being written for DMA such that people could write Rust code that like talks to DMA, which is just like in a different subdirectory, just like completely absurd. It's honestly like somewhat questionable whether Hellwig actually like had the jurisdiction over this like PR, but like whatever. Yeah, and then it's just like, you don't get to control who or what can use your code. You don't have to like Rust. You don't have to care about it. But to ignore the Rust side means that you don't have any say on the Rust side, and like you obviously like cannot have it both ways. So it's like obviously maintainers like just cannot do this. And then Helwig leaves. Or no, I guess that's not. Sorry, Helwig leaves. Like 4 days later. Behind that, Greg KH, who is like Linus's like alleged successor, if Linus, I guess like at some point he'll leave, but like in a long time, like Greg is like, oh, Rust is cool, and then like casually just like back to C++ again, which is like nice. So it's like, you know, where does that really get us? And then Helwig says, he just like so noticeably all of these people resign in like the same like oriful way, which is like they send a PR which removes themselves from the maintainers file. They don't like send just like a message to the mailing list which is like, oh, I'm done. Like they just like send the like .patch file, and then like it has like a small like comment, and then like they just like leave, and then like Linus obviously just like merges it because like he like hates him, and like I think this guy like stays on for like other things, but like he's just like gone from DMA, which is like whatever. So like Helwig is gone now. These are all the people that are gone. Wedson left because of quote non-technical nonsense, which was actually just like Ted So like yelling at him while he gave a talk. Hector Martin left because he fought with Torvalds, but like probably Torvalds like Torvalds kind of rolled it back, and also like Hector Martin just like randomly was catching strays, so he just like gave up. Carol Herbs just like randomly, like no relation to this entire conversation, but just like saw thin blue line and left. And then Helwig, the guy whose entire fault this was, just like dipped as well. Yeah. Oh, so new issue with Asahi Linux. Okay, so there's this person who like calls herself Asahi Lina. I don't think that's her real name at all, but like, she reversed the M1 and M2 GPU drivers, not the M3. But yeah, she reversed the M1 and M2. Yeah, I also.
Actually, I guess at this point, a whole fancy thousand pages.
I was on my side like 30 or something, right? Oh, even after that. Okay.
Also share the screen.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Okay. Asahi Lina says, I feel unsafe, and I'm just pausing work. Allegedly, there's like some like harassment behind the scene. I don't know, like not many people know about this or like what actually happened, but she leaves. But like people do actually keep shipping Rust. Greg, the aforementioned like number 2 guy, says that like after 6.13, so it's just like a bunch of drivers just like start getting added. There's like a clear tipping point where like new drivers are like starting to largely be starting to be Rust. And then it's like people are writing bindings for lots of things like PCI, IO, etc., such that it's easier to now write new Rust drivers. And then Nova. So remember like a while ago when the Novo maintainer quit, they rewrote the thing that person maintained in Rust, which is like, you know, I guess like people really hate TEDSO, and they just like really love doing all this. And then like another GPU driver was merged. And then Android binder, which is like the IPC mechanism that Android uses, was also written in Rust. I'm not sure why. I guess like by 6.14, Greg said we are almost at a real driver in Rust stage now. We're probably past that stage by 6.14, but like whatever. Okay. Android 16 ships with 6.12. If you remember before, 6.12 was an LTS version, and it was the first LTS version that had real Rust drivers in it. And also, they wrote an allocator in Rust. So Rust is everywhere now. And now it's December 2025. So it's the Kernel Maintainer Summit again. If you remember, like 4 years ago in 2021, this was the same meeting where Torvalds told Ojeda, like, there will be a Rust trial. It is just a trial. And then all of the maintainers just like obviously agreed that Rust must be permanent, and there is no pushback. And then this new guy, Dave Airley, is just like another person, and they run the graphics subsystem. And the plan is like in a year, like they're going to require Rust and disallow C for new drivers. And like the DRM subsystem is just gonna like ban C for new driver submissions. And then in December 13th, Ojeda just like arms and like posts a patch, and like the first word is the experiment is done. And then like the implication is not that like the experiment is done and like Rust is gone, but rather that Rust is here to stay. But like they were just like, I don't know, they were trolling or whatever. In December 16th, and then the day after this, someone finds a CVE related to Rust. And then they were like, Rust has bugs too. But it's like, obviously like this is like much different. One, it caused immediate crashes because of the way like panicking works, but no privilege creation, no like arbitrary code execution, etc., which would all have like probably happened if this was a C driver bug. And then like more importantly, 159 CVEs assigned to C code on the same day.
Is that
So it's,
that's like in the same date, like in everything on the same date?
Yeah.
Okay. So but I
like one Rust CVE on December 16th and 159 C CVEs. Like sure, whatever like more code in the kernel is C.
Solve this problem says only language for this particular
Yeah. And then 7.0, the PR for that was made like a few days ago, I guess, or I guess like 2 weeks ago. Linus does this around like 20 minor releases because like quote he like runs out of fingers and toes to count or something. So 19 becomes 20 becomes 7.0. And like this is the first major kernel version where Rust is in the kernel. So it's the first major kernel where there's no more experimental status, which is quite big. Okay, so I guess like just like some random stats. There are only actually 25,000 lines of Rust. Rust is not that big in the kernel. Sure, it like grew a lot, but it's just like it's like a few drivers. Like a few subsystems have a bit. Dev null is in Rust now because like allegedly like C dev null had a bunch of CVEs. I'm not sure how you write CVEs when writing dev null in C, but like if one language can make it happen, it's C. So what else? Yeah, Android binder, a bunch of other stuff. DRM is gonna just like force Rust. And then like so people were like kind of mad about this because like all these kernel maintainers are like on Debian and they're like, oh, my Debian version doesn't have the most recent Rust compiler. So there's like a in the kernel they've like pinned the minimum Rust version because you can do that in Cargo to 1.78, which is like the minimum version on Debian stable, which is just like no, you can't go below it.
Okay.
You can have it after and it'll work. But it must support 1.78. It doesn't have to support anything before 1.78. As long as the thing exists in Rust C 1.78, it's good. These are all the people that like we lost, I guess. Asahi Lina also had like a wife. I think she also was a casualty, but I don't think it was related to like Rust at all. She just like also left. ? There were some like really good Asahi Lina streams. Like she would just like hop on something. I think it was like Twitch and just like write GPU driver code. And now that doesn't happen, which is quite sad. But I guess like we sacrificed 4 people to like get Christopher Helwig out, which is maybe justified. But like Ted So is still like on ext4, so like maybe it wasn't worth it. Yeah. So Rust won. And then my citations are all just like largely Linux kernel mailing list because like things are just there.
Or both.
Yes. Anyone have any questions?
Who is the worst in this?
It's like easily Tedso. It's like not even close. Tedso killed like 3
Besides
people.
Tetsu.
Probably Hellwig, right? Like Hellwig just like randomly crashed out. Like there was this other guy. Like what was his name? I don't even remember. Like the guy who initially submitted the DMA PR. Like Hellwig just like randomly crashed out on him, and then like it caused this massive thing. But the guy who submitted the DMA PR, like nothing happened to him. So it's like who knows? But it's like the like getting mad over all of that was like over like something which is like absurd, which is you built Rust bindings for my code, not you changed my code. It was like something even more inconsequential.
People need to go outside.
I agree. So, this is the website, or this is the talk. Actually, let's watch it. Let's watch Tedso get up. I like saw the video with subtitles on. I actually have not watched the video. So I should probably screenshot this one. Does this do sound?
It should, but maybe you have to twiddle the knob. Who knows?
I don't see it as like. Oh wait, maybe I do. Maybe I do.
If you're using Typewire, you should check that your configuration is like a hobby
Oh, it works. Okay, we are going to watch Tedso crash out at some point.
For file systems,
Yes.
part of the XFS inode. You know, it's a part of the bcache FS inode. It's part of the XT4 inode. So,
And that
they-
C-struct is going to be there for a long time, so I'm not seeing the issue.
So Dave, to your point, let me just respond to that. This is for file systems that actually use iGetLocked, right? For those who use iGetLocked, they would use this, and we can call this iGetLocked. I'm happy to do that. For the ones who don't, who use create or whatever other methods exist, we would create equivalent of those on the Rust API. That would be the idea. So we're not trying to enforce new ways of specific ways of doing things. We're encoding how things are done in the iGetLocked example here. Right?
This is
that's what I'm
early
saying.
days. We're not trying to boil the ocean here.
Yeah, we're almost out of time here, and I suspect part of the problem here is you're trying to convince everyone to switch over to the religion as
No.
promulgated by Rust. And the reality is that ain't going to happen because we have 50 plus file systems in Linux. They will not all be instantaneously converted over to Rust. Before that happens, we will continue to refactor C code because we want to make the C code better. If it breaks the Rust bindings, at least for the foreseeable future, the Rust
Wait, this is
bindings
also
are a
true, by the way.
second-class
Like,
citizen,
Rust is
and
allowed
those
to,
file systems that depend on the Rust
C code will let you
bindings
break
will
Rust code
break,
anytime.
and that
Like,
is
you just
the
have to use
Rust
it and
bindings problem, not the file system community at large problem. And that's going to be true for a long, long time.
Okay.
And I think we just simply need to accept that,
Yeah.
right? Because the answer, you are not allowed to refactor to the C code because it would break 5 critical file systems that distros depend upon, is like not
But
a
that wasn't the
starter.
answer.
Okay?
Wait.
So like, we'll see. I suspect the best thing to do is you to continue maintaining your Rust bindings. Over time, there will be continued C code refactoring, right? Maybe we will start using, K-free RCU. If that breaks Rust, we will find out whether or not this concept of encoding huge amounts of semantics into the type system is a good thing
by the way.
or a bad thing. And instead of trying to convince us what is
Where
actually
else should it-
correct,
Like in Tedso's
let's see what happens in a year or two. And it will either work or it won't. And we will see more likely where does the pain get allocated? Because with most of these engineering things, it's almost always a pain allocation question.
So Ted, let me try to respond to that. I'm not saying that C is going to be stuck in whatever it has. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is I want for you guys to tell me what the semantics are of these things that will reflect in Rust. That's all I'm saying.
No, 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 no,
But wait, but the
no.
fragility, from my point of view, is the same of any user, right? Users of these APIs, they have to know about the semantics and they have to use them, right? And the rule is, make a change, a semantic change, you have to go and fix everybody else who you have broken, right? While Rust is a second class citizen, I'm fine for you guys to say we don't care about this. You guys
So
should
here's
look
the
at it.
thing. You're not going to force all of us to learn Rust. If I make a change, I will fix all of the C code because that's my responsibility. Because I don't know Rust, I'm
we
not
know.
going
We're
to
okay
fix
with
the
that.
Rust bindings.
Ted.
Sorry.
Ted, let me try to say it more clearly. I'm not trying to force you or anybody else to do anything else, right? I'm just
Guys,
asking politely to see if you guys could give us semantic information. That's all I'm asking.
Guys, there is a bit of a problem. I wasn't sure how to describe, but I think now I do. I don't want to insult any language by comparisons with Java, but there is a rather sick tendency to confuse functions and methods. Yes, I know about the lovely style that everything is an object and there is an object called, well, entire program, and any unattached function is declared as method of that, but let's not go there. We've seen what kind of shit Java is. Let's try to step away from that. Let's not lose the information, well, what actual methods are and what library helpers are.
The distinction between methods and functions is a much bigger deal in languages that lean.
Long story short, Ted So's take is like, things should live in my mind and not the Rust type system, which is like obviously stupid. So, yeah.
I like how his like entire this is my moment type rant is like, we shall see who gets the last laugh. And
Like-
the answer is not him. Yeah.
Maybe that, maybe the thin blue line thing. People really just like love saying words on the Linux kernel mailing list.